Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Brian Hess, CEO and founder of RevBio. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for having me. Thank you.
Well, this is super cool for us because, Brian, you are a true member of the M2D2 family, being a resident here in our incubator. So delighted to have you on the show and share the story of RevBio. As always, when we kick things off, we would love for you to tell the audience, what is the big clinical problem RevBio is solving for clinicians and patients?
Sure, we're dealing with bone, right? So there are complex injuries out there. Patients have devastating falls, breaks. And so in the muscular health space, these procedures can be very complex for surgeons. And that really means that healing can be quite long and painful. And so, if you think about it, the materials out there are, metal plates and screws. And so they can only do such a great job at putting things back together, especially in poor quality bone. And so we really think that the problem is just trying to bring these patients through the surgical process with surgeons and back up on their feet quicker, faster, stronger.
Wow. And, bone fractures, I'm sure many of us have broken a bone at some point in our lives, and this can happen at any age. This is a big problem. What are the numbers like? What are you looking at in terms of the size of this opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, it's from head to toe, right? So there are injuries or surgical procedures in your head, right? Your face, your jaw, your skull, all the way down through your body, your back, your spine, your arms, your legs. And so the numbers are vast, right? And so these injuries can be for different types of patients, right? So young, you get into, impact injuries from sports or car accidents, or as you age, your bones get weaker, and it could just be from a fall. And so these injuries are a variety of them, and we're dealing with, really the entire, human population. So the numbers, we feel it's like a huge market, right? So it's very exciting to kind of look at this broadly, but then on a specific level, we want to try to solve each nuanced problem because, there are broad problems that we're trying to solve, like healing, like I talked about. But in each situation, it's nuance.
Brian, I mean, we're getting right into it here. So tell us, how are you solving the problem today?
Yeah, sure. So, you think about it, I talked earlier, surgeons have had materials in the operating area for years, and they refine them: metal plates, screws, rods, hardware, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of think of it as a carpenter, right? Go back years, they've been putting things together with braces, screws. Then all along, a wood glue came around. That must have been like completely transformative for them. Kind of parallel that to today, right? We're trying to bring a bone adhesive, a super glue, to the surgeon. They don't have such a material. And so think of how we could change the surgical procedures by giving them a glue that could solve the problem more intimately, more elegantly, I should say. And so this is kind of the big idea. But our material also, it's not just that it holds things back together better or more efficiently, but the material is biomimetic. So that basically means the material looks and feels like the body, right? Like bone. It's comprised of calcium. So the body responds to it. And over time, our material is just a substitute for bone. Bone replaces it. And so really, there's no artifact left in the body over time. It's really elegant that way. And that's what's transformable about our material: an adhesive, a super glue, so to speak, and then a material that becomes bone over time.
That's really interesting. And this adhesive, I guess, where does it stand in development today? And, how are you kind of testing it in using it in, real life situations, or, how does it work?
Yeah, sure. So like we're in this world where we're translating it, right? Like it's not like, prototype stage where we're just trying to figure out what the material is. We have a good handle of that. We've characterized it, we've refined it. We have different indications. And so We've gone through animal testing, and now we're in humans in some indications. So it's all about translating it all the way, to the bedside, right? And so right now we're looking at treating patients with surgeons with our material under controlled FDA regulated studies. We're doing it in dental. We're going to start a study in cranial, and then we're going to expand into extremities in the spine in the future.
Okay, and so that's very interesting. I guess from a regulatory pathway standpoint, what is your primary focus exactly?
So what we have to show is safety, right? Primary is safety, right? So is the material biocompatible? Yes, we pretty much solved that. But is it safe in each indication, and how is it being used precisely, right? So surgeons need to know. I mean, if you get a glue, like we all know, like that could lead to a disaster, right? We've all failed at trying to glue something together. So we work closely with surgeons and with the FDA, and we define these plans and the conditions of use for every indication, and we sort of optimize the material and show it works. And then when we do that, we're able to go into patients, into human studies, and then generate the data necessary to show, like I said, safety and then efficacy. How well does it work? And then
And
after that,
yeah.
we'll get the approval.
Okay, cool. And are you in like these clinical trials today right now?
We are, yeah. We're actually treating patients. We're doing pilot studies, right? So that's where you're actually treating patients with surgeons under protocol under a smaller set of patients, right? Not huge numbers yet, but we're sort of optimizing the technique, making sure everything's good to go, and then we'll scale up to multiple sites, multiple surgeons, and then show that it's not just one or two surgeons that can figure out how to use this material. Everyone can figure it out, right? So that's the goal. That's the next stage of our growth.
Okay, that's really neat. And what kind of um, pathway and clearance are you looking to achieve? Is this like a 510K,
Yeah,
VO,
sure. So
PMA?
510K, yeah,
Okay.
510K assumes, right, that there's a
Mm,
predicate and you're
yeah.
showing, substantial equivalence. There's no material like this, right? And so we're looking at a de novo pathway, right? It's a new device, and we're going to create that product category. And so that's one sort of way to look at it. And then you got to look at it like for the conditions of use, right? Is it higher risk or medium risk, right? And so are we trying to replace metal plates and screw and it's standalone? That's pretty high risk. That's class 3. So that's a PMA, pre-market approval pathway. There's a larger level of evidence that's required to bring that to market, just more clinical data. De novo for like a class 2 medium risk, say you want to augment metal, but you want to sort of bear some of the load, not just on metal, but through the glue. You're sort of sharing the responsibility. That's class 2. We'll still have to require clinical testing, but maybe to a lesser degree.
Ah, brilliant. I love it. And I mean, at the end of the day, too, it's really neat because you think about your glue and a plate combined, that extra reinforcement together. I mean, talk about the improved outcomes that your patients are going to experience. Just fantastic. So it's really interesting. You're obviously making some great progress in, Richard. I mean, I think about obviously this go to market strategy here because I'm sure Brian and the team are really gearing up.
Oh yeah, and I'm getting excited because what I hear is multiple applications. This is clearly a platform technology, but also coming through loud and clear is you guys have a clear indication, a clear focus about how you're developing this in a sort of really sensible way. And I think you mentioned about a cranial application to get started. And for someone like myself, I've got 10 plates in my face. So, I've had a bump or two along the way. It's kind of interesting hearing how this type of technology could be applied. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about that first indication.
Yeah, so we're in the head, right? So we have an indication in dental, a couple indications, but one is for patients that lose a tooth, right? Could be failing and the dentist has to pull it out, but they want to get a replacement tooth. And that's, typically a dental implant. But they can't place that dental implant right away, right? The screw just doesn't go into that hole where the tooth once was. And so they have to rebuild that bone over time. So the glue, tetranite, allows that surgeon to take that tooth out in the same day, place the implant. So to the patient, what an advantage, right? You don't have to go back and forth for multiple surgeries. You can get that tooth out, get the implant in, and be on your way to full restoration and back to normal life. You don't have a hole in your mouth, right? So that's one key indication. We're in humans there. For cranial, We're looking at, brain surgery. So neurosurgeons, let's say, they go in to remove a tumor, or it could be multiple indications to go into the brain. They have to get access to the brain, so they have to remove a segment of bone, the skull, a cranial flap. And so at the end of this long surgery, they put the flap back with plates and screws. Yeah. So the patients have metal in sort of their skull for the rest of their life. Who wants that, right? So this glue will replace that. And so that is very slick. That's very novel. No one has that material out there. And so we will glue the flap back, and then over time, the material will become bone. It'll be fused right back. So to the patient, you'll never have that artifact to sort of like remind you of that episode in life where you went through that surgery. So that's really novel. We're really excited about that. We're starting clinical trials as we speak for the cranial flap indication.
Yeah, and
Could I
again,
just
it's so
chime in real
exciting.
quick, Richard? This is really near and dear. When you talk about dental, unfortunately, I do have an implant, in my mouth today. So, and it was a brutal experience. And I'm just curious, are you saying that potentially, right? Because the way it's done today is that they put that post in, and
Yep.
then you have to let it sit in there for like 6 months,
Yep.
and the bone has to heal around it. Would you still though need the post, or at least, or would you eventually be able to get away from the post,
So the
in that whole
post,
process? Because it's
right,
such a long time.
focus on the process, right?
Yeah,
So you need bone to put that post in, and then you need bone to grow onto the post after it's put in to like
yeah,
lock it on, right? And so what the glue does is allows you to put that post in immediately when you get the tooth out. You don't have to stage and like rebuild the bone first. So
yeah.
that's one surgical phase. And
Mhm.
then when the post does go in, and you think about it, that's like the analog to the root of your tooth, right? That's the structure that's holding it to bone. And so what the glue does is it provides that immediate bond to bone. And then now you can start to look at in the future about putting the crown on more immediately. So we're looking at collapsing this sequence of procedures, the staged approach. And to be honest, a lot of patients talking to dentists, they don't even come back. So they get the tooth
Mm.
out and they're like, you know what? My pain's going away. I don't really want to go back through that procedure. I think I'm okay. They're really not, because if you don't actually get it restored with a post, it's like a domino effect. And down the road, the next tooth will fail. But, maybe they don't have the money, right? It's expensive.
Mhm.
Or they don't want to go through the hassle of all the intervening visits. And so the glue sort of immediately solves those problems to the patient, puts it back together into the implant dentist. They don't lose the patient to sort of like lost to follow up, if you think of it that way. And so it solves a lot of problems in the business, if you think, but also solves the clinical problems that these patients face.
Awesome. Again, this is huge. I mean, we spoke about the different applications for this platform technology, but dental alone, that's huge. Cranial alone, that's huge. I can imagine investors' ears are like, wow, this is like something I need to learn more about. And something I'd love to circle back to is, you guys have a really interesting origin story about, where this technology has come from and just, the natural aspects of it. I'd love it if you could tell the audience a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, I mean, it started, like the idea of a bone adhesive has been around for decades. You can read articles about like if I only had a glue, right? And this is what it would need to do, but no one's been able to figure it out. And the reason is because you need a combination of it's got to work in a wet field, right? How many glues don't work in a wet field? So there's your first barrier. Number two, it's got to be materials that are non-toxic, right? That filters out materials. So you got all these issues and problems to sort of come up with this material. It's got to be sterilizable, and then ultimately it's got to be made at a commercially viable cost, right? And so we kind of thought like, well, let's start with Mother Nature. Look at all the barnacles that are attached to boat hulls, mussels, right? All these sea creatures, but they secrete this underwater glue. So we were like, that's kind of interesting. Other researchers are looking at that. We happen to come across this material called a sandcastle worm. What the heck is that? They build an underwater labyrinth, right? A sandcastle, and they glue grains of sand together with their own secreted glue. We studied the glue and we found, look, wow, there's an amino acid in there. And so we said we don't want to like be squeezing the glue out of these worms and trying to harness the energy. No, let's try to reverse engineer it. And so we went to a synthetic process, but we got motivated by Mother Nature. And that's what we did. we combine, calcium phosphate, which is what your bone is. That's the mineral with the organic, which is the amino acid. And we created a glue. And lo and behold, not only did we synthetically do it, so we can do the low cost of goods, can scale it up, but it's biocompatible. These materials are in our bodies, so we don't have to worry about foreign body reactions. So like we got inspired by Mother Nature, but we went through this reverse engineering approach to sort of solve some of these other issues. And now we have a platform technology that's commercially viable and can scale with the different indications and with volume.
I'm feeling inspired. I'm sure like the audience hearing this, I mean, you're ticking so many boxes in that biomimicry approach, which we had actually another guest on, Ben Friedman, talking about how they're using the slug and the glue for their application. So it's so interesting how seeing this used in, real life cases. And we touched on, you have this clear pathway, and Kyle, I'm sure that, like we always talk a little bit about the feedback. I'm kind of interested now, what's that
Yeah.
feedback?
I was thinking the same thing. What are the clinicians saying, and doctors saying now that are kind of using the tetranite glue, in clinicals? I mean, what's their feedback been like?
Oh, I mean, it's really exciting. So we get them involved early in the development process, right? So they're working with our engineers. We're sort of doing the early stage trials, in cadaver bones, right? Because
Mhm.
that's a great model to kind of like allow the surgeons to do like mock surgeries and really get a sense of how well the material works. They become enamored, right? Because this is the material they've been waiting for. And then they work with us, work with the FDA to get it, cleared, right? We do all the testing, then we go into humans. So now they're involved with the early human studies, right? And so then they get their experience in the clinic, and then we get the feedback. And then, like I said, we'll start to scale it up to other clinicians. They go to the trade conferences, they're talking about it, there's a buzz. We're followed by a lot of clinicians. A lot of our investors are clinicians because they get it, right? It's like immediate, like this is something I could use today in the operating room. And so now it's just how quickly can we get it to them, right? And quick is, sort of relative term, right? Like we're in the medical device industry. We have to sort of prove all the tests out. And so they're waiting for it, and they're helping us because they know that we have to get all the testing and the protocols defined so that we can like scale it up, across the surgical community.
Yeah, Brian, you do such a great job too at explaining, like, you just make it sound so simple and easy, right? You're really painting this picture. But to your point, it's the medical device industry. It's challenging, and there are their challenges, and Richard, I mean, we talk about it all the time with our guests on the show. It's not always rainbows and butterflies, and there's always unique challenges along the way, and I think that's something that I'm interested to hear a little bit more of too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to wake up and have the glass half, full approach, right? Because
Yeah.
you're going to get knocked down more often than you wish. You have to get back up. It's persistence. Ultimately, that's the number one trait I think that we have as a company. We're inspired, we're motivated, but we want to get it there. We just our head is already seeing the vision of surgeons using this, and so it's like we have to solve this. And it's us, right? We know the material works. We just have to make sure we spend our money wisely, right? Because it's a funding trap, right? Like you get the money, are you spending it wisely? Because you got to do all the testing, and you only get 1, 2 tries on these tests, right? And so it's really a problem that's not about the technical issues anymore in terms
Mhm.
of will the glue work? It's sort of can we navigate the process, right? Can we navigate the testing? And that's not trivial, right? But if we do it, we think that's a competitive advantage. The next company trying to do the same thing, and there will be others, will say, hey, bone glues makes a lot of sense. Let's try ours. Even if they have that technology, they're going to have to navigate it. So, to the company that gets there first, hats off to them, right? Really for any industry. But we think that's sort of what is in our DNA, like the persistence. And so that's kind of our story.
Yeah, and I think that story is so true, Brian. I mean, again, being in the incubator, I see you guys hustling every day. It's amazing work that the whole team put in. And again, like we spoke a little bit before we came online, but you're going to be heading off to LSI. You and Grayson are jetting around. You are making it happen. So What's that funding landscape been like for RevBio? Because we all know in the past year it's been a tough space.
Yeah, I mean, people immediately understand like there's a value of this material. That's good. It's the regulatory pathway. There's been a lot of failures, right? Great technologies just can't get it to market. And so, we have to bear that burden. And so we do have to navigate it. We've sort of figured out our secret sauce, right? So clinicians, they get it. They're happy to invest and get involved with us, and that's where the value add is, right? We're trying to figure out how to use the material and define it. And so they're great investors, but also non-dilutive grant funding. RevBio has raised nearly 1-for-1 for every dollar we've raised. We've almost raised $1, just shy of it, in non-dilutive grant funding. And so this is the Small Business Innovation Research Grants, SBIR grants. We've raised nearly $20 million in grant funding, and that's opened the door for all of these indications. And investors see that, and it's a leveraging effect. And so they feel like, wow, my dollar is getting immediately almost a return. And so that's a secret of our success. Now, though, we're going to be going to the next stage, right? Not just individual private investors, but institutional investors. What they want, though, is clinical data, right? So they've shifted their risk tolerance further in the continuum or further out from our lens. They want to make sure that, we're taking a risk, but we want to make sure that we have some assurances. So they want to see some of that early clinical data. Now that we have it, this is our year. So we're going to try to go full on, try to raise that capital. Tough environment, right? Last couple of years, but it's, starting to get better. There's signs of it. And so we're going out to LSI, which is a great life science, investor conference. And that's an example of us getting in front of the larger investors to tell our story and to show them the early data, and then hopefully get the funding and move on.
I think
Yeah,
that's a great segue too into kind of these next 6 to 18 months as well, and I think about some of those critical milestones that RevBio is looking to achieve, and maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the clinical studies, right? That's our focus. We have dental, we have cranial, and later this year, we're actually going to get our glue for treating fractured bones in the extremities, arms and legs.
Mhm.
Our goal is to get that into a human clinical trial. So we think of it as like shots on goal. Yeah, we actually think everyone's going to be successful. There's no reason not to believe that. But any program could have its hurdles. So having the diversity is an approach. That's a strategy we have. We can do that because we're operating on the same platform, and optimizing it for every indication. Our milestones, though, is getting through the pilot studies with the evidence so that we can get full scaled up studies with the FDA. That's our largest value inflection point for us. And
Mm.
so we're like rounding the corner, so to speak, and kind of heading to home to get that data. Pilot study data in these clinical indications that will translate to the evidence, which is what institutional investors want to sort of mitigate, their risk profile.
And how close are you to getting that, I guess market approval here?
Yeah, we're looking at 2 to 3 years for humans, right? And so we'll finish off the pilot, we'll scale up and do those human studies over the course of 2 to 3 years, and then apply for the approvals. So, excuse me, we're looking at 2000, at this point, 26, 27, 28. That's when our pipeline of products will be coming to market. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Okay.
right? And so that's kind of the time to market. One interesting thing, though, is that we test in animals before humans. However, the veterinarians are saying, what about us? And
Mm,
so what a great early access market. So we're
true.
working now on a dental indication for our dental product for humans, but for veterinarians and canines. And so we see that as an opportunity to launch that product possibly by the end of this year, but within the next 1 year.
Wow.
and doing all this, of course, you've built a really diverse team to take this to market. I wonder if you could talk a little bit now about like how that team's come together and just some of the background of the founding team.
The founder's great story. I mean, I invented this when I was at a Stryker, over 10 years ago, and they saw the value. Absolutely. I mean, we won corporate innovation awards, the inventing team. However, they knew it was going to take a lot of time and cost and they would rather just invest their money on products that are saleable, ready to be sold. So I went to business school to sort of become an entrepreneur, right? Engineer to business. And that's where I met Grayson Allen, who's now a co-founder and, of course, CFO, COO of our company. We immediately, hit it off on some of our projects. And I told him about this project, and he's like, "That's fascinating. If we could find the money," I'm like, "Yeah, if we could find the money, this is your background." And so we have very complementary skill sets. We graduated business school, we went to Stryker, and we organized and negotiated an exclusive license to this technology. So that's kind of an interesting story, right? Like we essentially brought it out of this big company where, innovation is best, right? And startups. And our motive was to find the money and build the team. In parallel to that, I have a lot of engineers and scientists that I've worked with in my history, and we all work together at a company, and we work together, and I knew they would be a fantastic founding team, the doers, to try to like get these prototypes tested and figure out manufacturing and bring it to market. So our founding team is really diverse and committed. And so since then, we've been attracting surgeons and engineers, M2D2, for example. What a pipeline it's been. We've hired over 30 interns in the last 5 years from colleges in the Boston and even outside the state of Massachusetts, but a lot of them from UMass Lowell, probably half of them from UMass Lowell. And then they come in, they get their experience and they want to come back. They graduate and we hire them. So there's a percentage of hires from colleges that formerly worked for us for interns. So we're like organically building this team one by one. Now we're adding staff on the ops side and on the marketing team, and the growth in the future will be on the clinical team, right? The team that is going to be launching and executing all these clinical studies.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of you Lowell grads, shout out to your senior product development engineer, Molly. I think it's Shut. Is it might be, did I say her last name correctly?
Yeah, Molly is just, I mean, she's a classic example of someone that RevBio looks for. She rolls up her sleeves, she gets in there, she works very well with surgeons and with her fellow colleagues. And, they're in the back working on the product, and then they get out in front of surgeons. So,
Yeah.
they have this unique trait where, engineers are like, oh, they can't talk to people. Our engineers, they do all the engineering, but then they are fantastic with people, even with investors they interface with. It's not like we tuck them in the back and don't let them out. No, they are intrinsic to our team. And so Molly is a great example, along with others.
Yeah. You had Molly actually lead the pitch off for RevBio at one of the impact pitch offs. And like she just crushed it. And it was super inspiring to see her get up there and pitch your company and technology. I mean, like, just what a rock star. And to empower your team like that and give them the opportunity, and it just shows the confidence that you have and in your team, and it just shows how well rounded your team is. And so that's huge, and I
That's a
love to
huge
see it.
compliment. That's a huge compliment to me,
Yeah.
to our executive team, and just to our entire RepBio team, because what confidence boosters these engineers get. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why they want to work with us. It's not like they're just doing one thing. They are very dynamic, and they get a huge opportunity to launch their career. And so when they get opportunities to do pitch competitions themselves, they are like building their own career and developing themselves, not just as an engineer, but as a business person. And
Mhm.
so that's exactly the type of team that we have.
Yeah, Kyle, I'm
And I
thinking
guess,
it's just
yeah.
brilliant getting to see all this happen, like as you say, at the live events and again, being here in the incubator, and it's such a journey, and actually getting to see this on a day-to-day basis is really cool. I'm sure, Brian, you've clearly got a lot of experience and you've picked up a lot of learnings by going on this journey. If you had to give the audience some advice now, like what would be sort of like the top 1 or 2 tips that you've picked up along the way?
I mean, to the entrepreneurs out there or the wannabes, right? Like an engineer, for example, like it's uncomfortable. Like we just talked about getting out of your zone, out of your lane, but you want it, right? So at some point you got to take a jump or a risk. And so obviously, you know, it was calculated risk. You know, we had this material, I was very confident in it. But still, like, you know, you don't know where it's going to go. Many of the founders, we didn't take salaries the first few years. And so that's rough. But you get through that, and like, how passionate are we? How exciting. That's a great story. And so ultimately, you know, I you know, just want to motivate people that, you know, if they think they have something or a team, you know, it's worth it. And when you're in, you know, regions like Boston, or wherever, you know, there are ecosystems that support you, right? And so M2D2, for example, our story is so well supported by M2D2 because all of the resources that have been provided to us. You just don't have that. You can't develop a medical device like we have without all the resources provided, equipment, space, and the people, like I talked about earlier. And so use your network, use your ecosystem, and go for it.
Nice.
Really
Yeah. Again, Brian, that's just such great advice. And Kyle, you know, I think what's coming through again is just the fact that, you know, Brian has great leadership. He's inspiring the team, and clearly there's a great vision, you know, set ahead.
No doubt. I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, you have so many exciting milestones ahead. But what about 5 years from now? Where's RevBio 5 years from now?
Well, I mean, if you think of the story, right? If we're going to launch products in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that's kind of our MO, right? We want to get it to market. And, you know, go back to what I said, like a company like Stryker was like, it's best outside our company, find an entrepreneur and let them figure out how to bring it to market. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring it to market. At that point, you know, we're not, you know, at least where we think about now, we're not a sales organization, right? So we'll partner back up with a company like Stryker or any incumbent that's already out in the market dominating. This will be a fantastic technology product to put in their bag. And at that point is when we talk about the partnerships and the exits. So 5 years is really, that's probably when, you know, realistically, you know, knock on wood, when things go well, that's when we'll be looking at exits.
Yeah, that's neat. And there are definitely, I know Stryker probably has a special spot, in your heart, that being, where you came from.
Yeah.
But you think about the sports medicine or companies out there today, there's a lot of big players out there that are probably very intrigued and interested in your technology and following, your progress closely. So, it's that's exciting stuff. And, yeah, I mean, I just can't wait to see what happens there. So I guess, this has been an amazing conversation. There's probably a lot of, really inspired people, people that probably are interested in potentially maybe working for RevBio today, or tomorrow at some point, joining the team, supporting your initiatives. How do people, what's the best way to kind of get in touch with you?
Well, okay, we're in Lowell. We're at M2D2, so that's
Yeah.
physically where we are. We have social media presence on LinkedIn where you can follow us. We're posting all the time because that's a great network for us. Instagram, through our website, revbio.com, there's a contact form. And then Brian Hess, right? bhess@revbio.com. It's simple as that.
Oh, bold right there. Right. That inbox is going to just be that much more packed after this episode goes live. I'm telling you that.
I hope so, Kyle. I hope
Good.
so.
Nice.
Well, this has been absolutely brilliant, Brian. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the RevBio story.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's great to be able to do this with your team here, M2D2. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much, guys.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Brian Hess, CEO and founder of RevBio. Again, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.